There is a filter of wet coffee grounds in your kitchen right now. In 1953, that same handful went out to the garden and grew tomatoes worth bragging about. Not onto the tomatoes. That is the whole thing, and it is where almost everybody now goes wrong. Those grounds had somewhere to go and a job to do, and it was not the job the internet tells you it is, and the difference between the two is the difference between a heavy crop and a beautiful green plant with nothing hanging on it. Now go and look at wherever you have been dumping yours. If you have been tipping them at the base of a plant, get down and put a finger on that spot. There is probably a dark mat there, packed down maybe a quarter-inch thick, and if you pour a little water on it, you will see the water run sideways rather than soak in. That crust is not feeding anything. That crust is a lid. I grew up on a place where the coffee pot got emptied into the same bucket every single morning for as long as I can remember, and that bucket went out the back door once a day, and it did not go anywhere near the tomato row. I want to be careful here because this is a subject where nearly everything you have read is half right, and the half that is wrong is the half people act on. Coffee grounds are genuinely useful in a garden. They were genuinely used in gardens like that one, but almost every reason given for it today is either backward or made up, and I'm going to walk you through which is which. By the end of this, you will know the one thing about coffee grounds that nearly every gardening article gets wrong, and it is a matter of chemistry, not opinion. You will know why the thing people do for bigger tomatoes reliably gives them fewer. You will know where those grounds actually belonged, and you will know the two things in your garden that decide the size of a tomato, neither of which is in a coffee filter. Stay with me because the second part is the one that costs people their crop. Here is the reframe, and it undoes most of what you have heard. Used coffee grounds are not acidic, and that single sentence takes down about 80% of what is written on this subject. The whole popular case for coffee grounds runs on the idea that they acidify soil and that tomatoes want acid. Both halves of that are wrong. Coffee itself is acidic, certainly. Yeah, but think about what happens when you brew a pot. Those acids are water soluble, which is exactly why they end up in your cup. That is what brewing is. By the time the grounds are sitting spent in the filter, most of the acid has left with the coffee, and what is left behind tests close to neutral. Not always exactly, and it varies with the bean and the roast, but a used ground is nowhere near the sharp acid people imagine they are handling. Unused grounds are a different matter. Fresh, unbrewed coffee is acidic, but nobody is throwing away unbrewed coffee, and the second half is wrong too. Tomatoes do not want acidic soil. Tomatoes are happiest in a range that sits just slightly on the acid side of neutral, which is roughly where most decent garden soil already is. Push a tomato bed genuinely acidic, and you do not get bigger fruit. You start locking up the nutrients the plant needs to take up, so the entire premise is upside down. People are applying a material they believe is acidic, which is not, to a plant they believe wants acid, which does not, and yet it worked on that farm. So what was actually going on? Nitrogen. That is the real answer, and it is where the trouble starts. Coffee grounds carry a meaningful amount of nitrogen for a kitchen scrap, somewhere around 2% by weight. That is genuinely useful material, but it is bound up in organic matter, which means it is not available to a plant until soil microbes break it down and release it, and that takes time and the right conditions. Now, here is the part that decides your harvest, and it is the second thing almost nobody tells you. Nitrogen grows leaves. It does not grow fruit. Feed a tomato plant plenty of nitrogen, and it will do exactly what you asked. It will put up a magnificent dark green plant, thick stems, leaves like a hedge, and it will pour everything it has into that vegetative growth and set very little fruit. Every gardener has grown that plant. It looks like the best tomato in the row right up until August, when the neighbor with the scruffier plant is carrying in baskets, and you are looking at 3 tomatoes and a lot of foliage. So a person hears that coffee grounds are good for tomatoes, dumps a winter's worth of nitrogen-rich material around the base of their plants in June, and gets a smaller crop than if they had done nothing at all. And they will never connect the two because the plant looks so healthy. That is the trap, and it is set by advice that is trying to help. And there is a second reason people believe in this that is worth naming because it is not stupidity. Coffee grounds often do seem to work at first, and there is a real mechanism behind that. Scatter grounds around a plant, and you have added a little organic matter to the surface. Worms come up for it. The soil right there gets slightly better structure. On poor, thin soil in a container or in a bed that has never had anything put into it, That small improvement is genuinely visible, and a person quite reasonably concludes the grounds did it. Now, what they have actually seen is the effect of organic matter, not the effect of coffee. Any organic matter would have done it, and most of them would have done it better and without the nitrogen problem attached. Like the grounds got the credit for a job the general principle was doing. It is also worth understanding why a farm had this material in quantity at all. Coffee was cheap and it was constant. A pound cost well under $1 in the early 1950s, and a farm kitchen went through it steadily, a pot in the morning and often another at noon, and every pot left grounds behind. Over a year, that is a real volume of nitrogen-rich material arriving free through the kitchen door every single day in a household that threw nothing away. I ran this side by side because I did not want to argue about it. 2 rows of the same variety, same bed planted the same afternoon, same water. Down 1 row, I did what the internet says and worked a good quantity of grounds into the soil around each plant. Down the other, I put nothing but a couple of inches of finished compost from the pile, which had grounds in it among everything else. By the middle of July, the coffee row was the better-looking row by a distance. Taller, darker, bushier, anybody walking past would have picked it. I picked from the compost row for 6 weeks, and the coffee row never caught up. The final tally was not close. The good-looking row gave me about a third less fruit, and what it did give came later. Same seed, same bed, same season, 20 feet apart. The only difference was whether that material had been composted first or dumped raw at the roots. That is the number to carry out of this. Not a pH reading, a third of the crop, given away for a plant that photographed well. If this is already making you think about where you have been dumping yours, do me a favor. Hit that like button, subscribe, and turn the notification bell on while you are there. I put out one of these every week, the old practical knowledge that worked for 100 years and got quietly replaced by something out of a bag. The bell is the only way these reach you, then stay right here because the next part is where those grounds were supposed to go, and I want to be plain that the coffee row was not damaged, nothing died, and nothing looks sick. That is exactly what makes this hard to catch. A nitrogen problem in a tomato does not look like a problem. It looks like success, right up until you are counting fruit. Here is the second part, and it is the whole method. The grounds never touched the garden, they went in the pile. That bucket by the back door was not a fertilizer bucket. It was the compost bucket, and the grounds went in with the peelings and the eggshells and whatever came off the plates, and the whole lot went out to a heap in the corner of the garden where it sat and worked for months. And this is where the grounds earn their keep because in a compost heap, they are one of the most useful things you can put in. A pile needs 2 kinds of material: carbon, the dry brown stuff, leaves and straw and shredded paper, and nitrogen, the green wet stuff, grass clippings and kitchen scraps. Get the balance right and the heap heats and works fast. Get it wrong and it sits cold or goes slimy and sour. Coffee grounds are a nitrogen material. They look brown and everybody files them as brown, and that is a common mistake. In a heap, they behave like a green, and they are one of the better ones because they are fine textured, they hold moisture, and the microbes get straight into them without having to break down a tough structure first. So a household that drinks coffee has a steady daily supply of exactly the material most home compost piles are short of. Not a garden fertilizer, a compost ingredient, and the pile did something to those grounds that mattered enormously. It composted them, so the nitrogen came out already worked into a stable form, mixed through everything else, released slowly, rather than all at once. That is a completely different thing from raw grounds at the root of a plant in June. That was the whole system, and it is worth seeing plainly. The coffee did not feed the tomatoes. The coffee fed the pile fed the soil fed the tomatoes. 3 steps, and every step mattered, and the modern version skips 2 of them and wonders why it does not work. Now let me tell you about the money, and this one is not really a villain story. Nobody sells coffee grounds. That is worth saying because it is the reason this method survived and also the reason it got mangled. There is no industry with an interest in telling you the truth about them, and there is also nobody with an interest in correcting the myth, so the myth just circulates freely, gets repeated, gets built on, and nobody checks. But there is a quieter thing worth naming. Look at what is sold for tomatoes instead. There is a tomato fertilizer and a bloom booster and a calcium spray for blossom end rot and a soil acidifier and a starter fertilizer, and most gardeners buy several of them every spring. And most of those products are answering questions the soil would answer for free if it had enough organic matter in it. The blossom end rot spray is the clearest case. Blossom end rot is almost never a soil that lacks calcium. It is a plant that cannot move calcium reliably, and the usual reason for that is uneven watering. You get a dry spell, then a soaking, then dry again, and the plant cannot keep up. The fix is mulch and consistent water, not a bottle. I am not telling you there is a room somewhere where men decided this. There is not. What happened is simpler and worse. It is a quiet agreement among everybody who profits to sell you an input rather than a practice, because a bag has a price and a compost heap does not. Nobody has to coordinate and nobody has to lie. They only have to keep the conversation on what to add and never on what to build, and it has stayed there for 70 years. If that landed, hit like and subscribe and ring that bell. Now here is the third part, which is what actually makes a tomato big, because it is not the coffee, and it never was. Water first and steadily. A tomato is mostly water, and it swells at a rate set by how consistently it can drink. Uneven watering is what splits fruit, what causes blossom end rot, and what stalls growth in the heat. Deep and regular beats frequent and shallow every time. Mulch second. And this is the one most home gardeners skip. A few inches of straw or leaves or grass clippings over that soil keeps moisture even, keeps the roots cool, and keeps soil from splashing up onto the lower leaves, which is how a great many tomato diseases start. Mulch does more for tomato size than any product on the shelf. Organic matter third. Compost worked in every year, so the soil holds water like a sponge and releases nutrients slowly. That is the thing the pile was building all along, and then the small ones that matter. Full sun at least 6 hours and preferably more. Enough spacing that air moves through and the leaves dry. And the right variety, because a tomato bred to be small will be small no matter what you feed it, and a beefsteak type will be big even if you treat it poorly. Now the warnings, because this subject has some real ones. First, and this is the one that matters most in a house, coffee grounds are dangerous to dogs. Caffeine is toxic to them and grounds hold a good deal of it, and a dog that gets into a compost heap or a bucket of grounds can get seriously ill. If you have a dog that digs, keep that bucket lidded and your heap enclosed and call a vet without waiting if it happens. Grounds are a hazard to cats as well, and there is a similar problem with a heap that has gone moldy. Second, do not put grounds anywhere near seeds or seedlings. Coffee contains compounds that suppress germination and slow young plant growth. That is not folklore, it is why coffee plants themselves have it. Keep grounds out of seed beds, out of seed starting mix, and away from anything you have just direct sown. Third, do not apply them thick. That mat I described at the start is real, and it does exactly what it looks like it does. The fine particles pack down into a layer that sheds water instead of letting it through, and now your plant is drier than it was before you helped it. If you use grounds directly at all, scatter them thinly and rake them into the top inch of soil rather than laying them on. Fourth, do not overdo the nitrogen in the compost pile either. Grounds are a green, and a heap that is all greens goes anaerobic and sour and smells like ammonia. Balance them with plenty of dry brown material, roughly by volume, a good bit more brown than green. Fifth, do not chase a pH number without measuring one. If you actually want to know what your soil is doing, a test kit is a few dollars, and your county extension office will do a proper one for very little. Adjusting soil you have not tested is guessing with your season. And one plain one. Do not use grounds from flavored coffee, and rinse out anything with a lot of sugar or dairy in it, which draws pests to a heap. So here's exactly what to do starting tomorrow morning. Keep a lidded container by the coffee pot and put the grounds in it, filter and all, if you use paper ones, because those are a brown material and they balance the pile. Start a heap, and it does not need to be anything. A pallet bin, a wire ring, a corner. Layer your greens and your browns, keep it about as damp as a wrung-out cloth, and turn it when you think of it. Give it a season. Finished compost is dark, crumbly, and smells like a forest floor rather than like anything you put in it. When it looks like that, it is ready. Put 2 or 3 inches of it on your beds in the spring and work it lightly into the top few inches. That is your feeding for the year for most gardens. Then mulch on top of that and water deeply and on a schedule you actually keep. And if you have grounds left over and no heap yet, scatter them thin around established perennials or shrubs and rake them in. Not on seedlings, not thick, and not at the base of your tomatoes in June. If you have gotten this far with me, hit like, subscribe, and turn on that bell. Nobody sponsors a video telling you to build a heap instead of buying a bag, so the only thing keeping this in front of people is you. One more thing. Because it is the part I actually remember. That heap in the corner took everything. Coffee grounds, potato peel, corn husks, the bedding out of the chicken house, the weeds out of the row, leaves raked in the fall. Nothing went off that place in a bag. It went to the heap or to the chickens or to the hogs, and every one of those roads ended back in the same garden anyway. And the tomatoes off that ground were the size people remember, which is the whole reason anybody asks about this. But it was never one trick. It was 15 years of the same corner of the garden getting everything back that the house took out of it. I asked my grandfather once what his secret was with tomatoes. He said he did not do anything to the tomatoes. He said he had been working on that dirt since before I was born. You did not forget this. Nobody taught you and then you forgot. It was taken from you one bag at a time, one product for one problem at a time, until you were standing in a garden center holding 4 bottles for a plant. Your grandfather grew better with a bucket by the back door and a pile in the corner. So do one thing this week. Go and look at wherever you have been dumping your grounds and pour a cup of water on it and watch whether it soaks in or runs off. Then tell me in the comments what happened, what county you are in, and what your family did with theirs, because I read every one, and those stories are the reason I keep recording. And if this rang true to you, come back for the next one, because I am going to show you how she kept a cast iron skillet slicker than any coated pan sold today, why the thing everybody does at the sink is quietly ruining it, and the one step that takes 10 minutes and lasts a generation. Nobody sells it, so nobody teaches it. I will. Keep it simple, keep it yours, and remember the people who grew a crop out of a bucket and a heap in the corner knew things we're only starting to remember.